Bindweed over the top of your head, a 25-metre diseased tree, and 2 years of neglect. But the main problem in this garden is that it's only 5 metres wide, while being 30 metres long. It's garden designer Edmund Jackson's own garden, and what he did with it is a masterclass in how to turn a narrow corridor into a gorgeous garden. It's Alexandra here from the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel and blog, and let's find out more. So, Edmund, tell me what this garden was like when you first got here.
So when we moved in, which was in 2022, July of 22, it was a blanket wall of bindweed. So it had been unlived in for 2 years, had been on the market for the same amount of time. And so we opened the back gate and were just greeted by 6-8 foot high bindweed, and we had to fight our way through. We had to hack it back. But we knew that there was potential in the garden. We could see the walls. We knew that there was the opportunity to make something as well, sort of, even though it was quite a, at that point it wasn't a blank canvas. It was very much a bit of a jungle, sort of overgrown. There was a large false acacia tree, 25 metres tall, that was only 5 metres from the house. And whilst it was lovely, we were concerned, and sort of there had been concerns from the neighbours. We got an arboricultural survey, and it was found to be diseased, sort of rot right through sort of to the core, and so we did have to get that felled. And that in itself was the start of us beginning to be able to see what the garden itself looked like, what it held, what the rest of the garden held. So we hacked back, explored. And then, because the bindweed was so thick, so deep, we had to cover it for about 6 months. Cover it with cardboard, try and starve the bindweed of light to make the very best we could of it. And then sort of took it really back to ground level. So what we really wanted to do was think, well, how are we going to utilise this space? How are we going to sort of break that up? We don't just want it to feel like a one long expanse. So yeah, that's when the sort of really thinking about the design sort of started to take place. A lot of the time you'll have it where the gardens are just planted with beds either side of a boundary, and they feel long, straight, and it really just, that extenuates the sense of length. So really, I knew that what we had to do was break that up. So you'll find here that we've got a path that meanders, sort of twists its way down the garden, and that's really key to break up the space. But then sort of within that, those sort of oversized beds, it's then about breaking up the sight lines as well, so that from the front of the garden you can't see to the end. You want then to take that step to explore the rest of the garden. What's beyond that tree? What's round that corner? And that sense of exploration and fun in a long and narrow garden, I think, is key to getting the most out of it, so that it's not all visible from your first viewpoint as you look upon it. You want some intrigue, what lies sort of to the rest of it.
So you said that you broke up the garden with paths, and what I've seen is that you've got different kinds of paths, you know, different materials for the paths. So what was the thinking there? The
material palette in the garden is quite sort of restrained. I've tried not to use too much, and much of the materials in the garden have actually been reused. So when we sort of were uncovering it, sort of digging it back, we were fortunate enough to find some lovely pavers our bench is on at the moment. Those were just buried underneath soil, sort of at the back of the garden, half under a shed, half not, so they weren't foundation. Also found lots of old bricks that are actually in keeping with the wall, in keeping with the house itself. So they really were part, I felt, of the garden, really part of the house, so reusing those just felt right. So a lot of it was reclamation of materials, and that way, even though we were building the garden anew, it gave the garden a bit of age immediately. Reusing these older materials, it really meant that the garden sat in its place well. Rather than feeling modern, it felt like actually it had sat here for a while already. Then looking at the other materials, it's sort of keeping the palette simple. So got Cotswold chippings, small sort of gravel stones that sort of are the past. I just love the way they sound underfoot as well. It's sort of the way that they crunch gently underfoot. And that was, again, the garden's meant to be quite tactile. Because we've got the paths that wind down, the plants overflow the paths, and the paths are at right angles, but the overflowing of the plants really soften those edges, but they spill out. there's a tactile element of the plants, a tactile element of the stones underfoot as well. And then the other material that's used quite a lot in the garden is wooden sleepers. And those, again, sort of it's that natural form. So it's all natural wood, natural stone, and natural bark chippings as well in what is the area closest to the house, which is my son's play area. So those are play grade bark chippings as well, just for that safety. But again, they're a natural material that sort of, again, just was really thinking about tying the garden together, repetition of elements, but also really giving it a sense of age when we knew what we were putting in was quite new.
And of course, for people who aren't lucky enough to find their pavers when they dig up their garden, I think the advice perhaps would be, I don't know if you agree with me as a designer, that to find bricks and stone that actually go with what's already in your house at the moment, so local stuff.
Absolutely. And I think sort of salvage yards, reclamation stuff can be fantastic. Or even just looking, as you say, trying to find sort of as close a match as possible, because I think sort of when it matches the vernacular, I think it has a sense of place, and that sort of that feeling of matching what's going on in the local environment really helps sort of make the garden feel established quicker.
And what you've sort of done is gone across the garden, presumably that helps with the length. And so you've got these borders, big borders across the garden, and then seating areas and play areas and things like that. Is that right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's correct. So the path meanders down sort of the garden. It goes, I think there's sort of about sort of 3 different ways it winds. The garden's punctuated by sort of 3 main beds, and I think they're pretty oversized for the size of the garden. So most of them are about 3 metres wide, 3 by 3 metres, which, given that garden's only 5 metres wide, that's actually quite large. Some of them are slightly larger too. But each bed is then punctuated by an amelanchier, a multi-stem tree, and that's really to give that sense of flow, continuity, to knit all of those beds together. So yes, the garden does wind, but there's a sense of coherence to the beds, and then there are structural plants within each of those beds that are mirrored as well. What differentiates them is more the perennial partnerships that are planted in the beds, just to give that sort of sense of sort of progression, movement, but also differing interest as well in differing areas. But I'm a full believer in large beds and abundant planting. I think that's what I love sort of as a garden designer, the feeling of nature, sort of immersed in nature within the garden. And that's something that I really wanted to bring in for my wife and I, but also for my son, because I know he is just loves nature as well. So we go on bug hunts as well, sort of, and look out the insects. And I think his love of nature in some ways has been probably heightened by the garden as well. And that for me is means a lot.
Yes. And what are the key plants in this garden?
So there's a lot of repetition of shrubs, sub-shrubs, ornamental grasses, and then sort of other plants that are used really as those anchors. So the sub-shrubs that I have a lot of is lavender. So there's a lot of repetition of Haconocloa macra, which is a lovely mound-forming grass. There's also repetition of Pittosporum, particularly silver ball, and that gives a nice mound shape, which really complements the mounds of Lavandula Munstead, which is a lovely mound-forming lavender. Other plants that are repeated are the Stipa tenuissima, this is the grass just here, and that has a lovely flowing form to it as well. All of these give good interest, not just in summer, but also throughout the seasons. The Santolina as well, there's a lot of Santolina and 3 different varieties that are repeated throughout the garden. They give a lovely winter interest. It holds silver forms sort of into the autumn, into winter. And then the grasses as well give lovely sort of bronze forms as well, sort of hold their shape. And that was something that was really important to me when designing the garden. It wasn't just something we wanted to be interesting in the summer. We wanted it to be interesting, to be full of, still trying to fill it full of life, even though the garden goes dormant at that time during those colder months, to try and get us out here and use it. And I think it's worked to the most part.
And in terms of budgets, what was the most expensive thing about doing the garden?
So we got in a arboriculturalist to survey the tree once we saw signs of disease, and actually that cost of getting in an arboriculturalist, which then led to the necessity of getting a tree surgeon in to remove the tree from the garden. That was our largest cost. That was about £4,000 in total. Access is difficult. You'll see the garden's walled. And so are the surrounding neighbours. So there had to be a lot of careful work there because the tree was quite brittle when they were taking it down, but it was also 25 metres tall. So it was a large undertaking. That aside, sort of the main cost, labour I did all myself, so we managed to sort of avoid those costs. But otherwise, it's really been bringing in the planting, and that's not something that sort of we rushed to do. We started quite small. We didn't sort of buy large specimen plants. We bought quite small specimen plants in year one. I planned where they were going to go, knew that they would grow, but in the first year it looked quite bare in that sense, so we used a lot of annuals sort of in that year just to really fill out the rest of the garden. So because labour in the end, I mean it was my time, but it was free, actually the sort of the main expense has been on sort of plant material. And actually what's fantastic as the garden's matured is a lot of stuff has self-seeded. The erigeron, the verbena as well. We have some of the grasses that have self-seeded too, so that's actually been wonderful, and there's nothing quite like a free plant, really.
So what would your advice be to somebody facing a long, thin or long, narrow garden?
I think decide how you want to use the space. That's quite important because we wanted a outside dining area. We did want a lawn. Our lawn is small, it's about 4 by 3 metres. We wanted numerous places in which to sit and take in the garden as well. And then it was thinking about, okay, well, where can those places theoretically sit within the garden? And then how can I maybe break them up? Yes. Because I think the key point is, as I said earlier, it's really obscuring those sight lines, and sort of by breaking them up with oversized beds, actually sort of those oversized beds make the area feel much larger. It doesn't, despite them being really large, it doesn't pinch on the garden. It actually makes it feel like it's given more space. So be generous. I'd say be generous in sort of the size of the beds, be generous in the sort of planting you choose. Do try and obscure sight lines. Have a path that winds down. Think about where you want your areas. This table that we're sitting at now, this gets the most of the sun in the afternoon into the evenings, which is exactly what we wanted for when we're coming out and eating an evening meal, if we're entertaining. So I think thinking about sort of the location, the movement of the sun's important. But for a long, thin garden, really think about being generous with your planting, generous with the size of beds, and really do think about obscuring those sight lines, making it so that people want to see what's round the corner, what's round the next thing. And it could be that you punctuate beds with, it could be punctuated by a sculpture, what's beyond the sculpture, or masking the vision of something. And that could intrigue somebody to say, actually, I want to get back there and see that. And it draws us down the garden. It draws us sort of further into it. And I think having destination points are also important, because if we'd put the dining table right next to the house, there might be less reason to explore further down the garden. So it's thinking about how can I utilise the space, but how can I also sort of draw people through it?
We've talked about reclaimed and recycled hard landscaping and pavers, and if you want to know how to spot the bargains, there's a video coming up now on recycled and vintage garden ideas, so don't miss that, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.